Hello, everyone. Welcome to Steven Shinder Reviews in video form. I'm here to talk about the Doctor Who episode Wish World, the penultimate episode of this season. So, first off, general non spoiler thoughts. I liked it. It got me curious. It had my attention. I watched it at midnight, so it was almost 1 a.m. when I finished it. I was able to stay awake, but I didn't record right after right away because I felt like I needed to sit with how I felt about it and maybe sleep on it. And I also felt kind of tired. But yeah, I liked it. It does raise questions, questions that make me wonder, oh, how are they gonna follow up all this? As well as questions that are like, wait, what? But yeah, overall, I enjoyed it. I was thinking of giving it an 8 out of 10. I think it could potentially go down to 7.75, maybe. And it could depend on how things are wrapped up in the finale. But of course, we know how people felt about the wrap up in the previous finale. And that being said, if we're to compare two parters at the end of both of these 15th Doctor seasons, I would say the ending of the penultimate episode of last season had me more excited for what was coming next. Whereas this, not so much, but I am still curious. And there had also been a message beforehand, apparently, from Russell T. Never one of those "you'll want to watch this to not get spoiled" messages. And the reasoning, it didn't feel as big this time around as last week when we had, uh, I assume that you've seen last week's episode. If not, then log off right now. The episode titled, what was it called? The Interstellar Song Contest. The surprise that was in that episode, midway through, just to keep it vague for now, I guess. Like, it wasn't really on that level here, but I was still intrigued. So yeah, those are my general non-spoiler thoughts. Now I'll go into the spoiler thoughts. It begins in 1865, Bavaria. We see the Ronnie visit this family, and they have a new baby, the seventh son of a seventh son. Tying into this, I don't know what you would call it, trope, archetype that you kind of see in medieval fantasy fiction, or maybe fantasy fiction in general. Um, and what we learn later in the episode is that this baby, throughout the episode, I was wondering, like, who is this baby? Is this someone that I should know? But the most that we get is that this baby is, because it's a seventh son of the seventh son, it's sort of do they refer to it as a god of wishes or just a baby that grants wishes? But well, in any case, the Ronnie takes the baby, turns the dad into flower petals and the children into ducks, and I think the might have turned the mom into something else, or it was really late. I might be getting things mixed up, but it is quite telling that they don't show the transition and the transformations. It kind of just cuts away. It shows the children, then cuts away, and then cuts back to them, and they're ducks. I guess they didn't want to bother with the visual effects here because it might not come out so well. With Doctor Who in this era, I think we were under the impression that the effects would be top notch, and they have been for stuff like Sutek, but I think maybe there have been things here and there that I vaguely remember people pointing out they weren't as impressed with, visual effects wise. So I understand why they cut away, but I felt very conscious of it as it was happening, if that makes sense, like super aware of it. But then we cut to 2025. The Doctor and Belinda wake up in bed together. They're like a married couple. They have a daughter named Poppy, so it's like they are in this fake scenario. It has kind of human nature vibes, right? Like the doctor thinks he's just a human named John Smith. So kind of reminds me of that. Kind of weird seeing him and Belinda kiss because they're friends in the other episodes, but of course they're under this illusion, so they don't know what's going on. And this environment, this city, it becomes clear that you have to be happy and not doubt anything. And if you doubt stuff, then you are sort of not good. Like there's this rule against doubting things, which I think really hits hard in these times when you have pushback against questioning the status quo and wanting to question things so that they get better rather than going along with the uh, certain policies that might not be the best for people. So I'll just leave it at that. We do get a moment where the doctor mentions a comment about a man being good looking, and then another man is like, "How can you know that? A man can't say that about another man." And so it's very much a reminder of bigotry and this sort of heteronormative type of reality, and how there are people who want to just have it be that, the nuclear family idea, the white picket fence. Uh, so, yeah, there's all sorts of stuff going on here. Oh, we see Ruby meet the doctor, and she thinks that something is up. We also see Mel. I was a little surprised to see Mel again, to be honest, but I guess she's been it kind of feels like in this era, she's the new Sarah Jane Smith in terms of the classic Who companion who comes back occasionally. Although her role hasn't been quite as big as Sarah Jane Smith's became, even prior to getting her own spinoff. But yeah, speaking strictly about the show here, and Ruby goes on her own trajectory. She bumps into Shirley, the unit personnel member who's in a wheelchair, and she brings Ruby to this group of other people with disabilities. And again, this can hit hard for the real world. This idea that there are these people who are othered and not well taken care of, and we see that they're living in tents in this place. So now they are forming their own sort of resistance, and meanwhile, the doctor is questioning things occasionally, and um, people are not liking how he's doubting things. He even watches something on TV, and throughout all this, we get on the TV, the story of Doctor Who being read aloud. And interestingly, there's the mention of all the Time Lords being wiped out, and then the Doctor was the last of the Time Lords. And so in that moment, I was wondering, is this supposed to be in reference to the Time War or to the Spy Master destroying Gallifrey? Like, which one is it? But I guess the episode wasn't so interested in specifying. But yeah, Conrad has the wish baby, so this reality is his wish. That's something that gets revealed later. And on the television, there's this interruption, a transmission from Rogue himself. And these last few weeks, I honestly have not really been thinking about Rogue. So I was not expecting him to show up, even though when he first appeared last season, I'm like, okay, he's a character who's going to come back later somehow. And he's surrounded by fire on the screen, and seems like he's in some sort of hellish place, maybe the underworld or something. And he tries to give a warning to the doctor saying that tables don't do that or something like that. And so the doctor examines a table in the kitchen and how cups sort of phase through and uh, get smashed to pieces when they fall to the floor, of course. And meanwhile, we see the Ronnies, the two Ronnies. I'm going to refer to them as Mrs. Flood and the Ronnie for simplicity's sake. They have their dynamic where Mrs. Flood seems like more of the servant, but she also says, in a way, you're my child. You did spring from my loins. And it was such a weird interaction. And even the Ronnie is like, that's disgusting. So it's really strange. But yeah, so there eventually, things converge. The doctor meets the Ronnie, everyone else is pretty much together. I can't remember if anyone's like off somewhere else, but we get all these revelations. This is Conrad's wish. And the Ronnie, the doctor is still trying to remember who he is, and the Ronnie is sort of catching him up a little bit, shows the seal of Rassilon and mentions who Rassilon is, which is very helpful for members of the audience who might not know or remember. But she mentions that she and the doctor, that people thought that maybe they were lovers, and this had me wondering, was that a fan theory that fans had during the 80s when the Ronnie faced the sixth and seventh doctors? Or was that a theory that people had? Because I never really thought that they might have been lovers. So yeah, I don't know. I thought that was a bit strange, and so I was wondering if there was some lore being changed or added here or what. So that's one of the questions I'm like really confused about. The Ronnie says something about not wanting death but wanting life, and then we get the reveal that Omega is being summoned, and I expected this because I saw a friend speculate about it a couple weeks ago. You're basically just in an online comment, like we're gonna get Omega, aren't we? So I wasn't really that surprised, and even if I didn't suspect that this might be coming, I think I still would have been kind of whatever about it. Omega as a villain doesn't really do that much for me. I really enjoyed the Three Doctors special, but Omega in that and in what was it? There's been a Big Finish thing he was in, maybe a couple. But yeah, Omega is not really a villain who does all that much for me. And we don't even really see Omega. We see the Doctor falling as the ground is like breaking up, and he's falling toward the like glowing light. It's basically a literal cliffhanger. We get the to be continued. I was kind of surprised that there was no next time sort of thing. um, I should mention that I think there was a glimpse of Susan when the TV was being interrupted earlier. So I think that shows promise that maybe she'll have a role in the finale, and or that at the very least last week's episode isn't the only appearance from her. I was a bit worried that perhaps the Interstellar Song Contest would be all we get of her, but I think there are bigger plans with the character, like overarching plans. And even if she doesn't come back for the finale, maybe she'll come back for Christmas special or have more of a presence um, in a subsequent season. So, yeah, I guess we'll just have to see how that turns out. But yeah, left with questions. Sort of wondering what exactly is going on still, what's going to happen. It didn't quite have as much oomph as the penultimate episode of last season, the way that ramped up and ended, but it still had my attention. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching it. It kept me intrigued and curious. And I guess we'll just see how they stick the landing next episode. I know there are many questions that people still have that have not been answered, and I feel like with Doctor Who, you kind of have to not expect everything to be answered. There are some things here and there that should be answered, but I think it's a bit unfair to, at this point, expect every little thing to be answered. Like, I know, I certainly had this thought of, like, when the Doctor is remembering who he is and all the faces he's been. We see all the numbered incarnations plus the War Doctor and the Fugitive Doctor, but not the Shalka Doctor, even though there's a hologram of the Shalka Doctor in the episode Rogue. And that does call into question, how much of the Shalka Doctor does the 15th Doctor actually know about? I think you could just hand wave away that his memories are all catching up to him and they're not all back to him in this moment. So there's some other things like memories of a Shalka Doctor and maybe some other stuff that he hasn't recalled yet. So that's sort of my headcanon that I'm going with for this. But yeah, we'll see how the finale pans out. Just 1 week away. And yeah, hopes, just more season. That's basically my main hope. Um, and more for Belinda next episode. It kind of felt like she took a backseat here, which I understand. They're giving Ruby some stuff to do, so maybe it'll be more equal. Like, maybe this is more of the Ruby episode, and next episode will be more of the Belinda episode, but we'll see. So very curious. We'll see what happens. Thanks for tuning in to Steven Shinder Reviews in video form, and I'll see you all soon.